In this demonstration, I will show you that closing tabs with new items can lead to an exception. After you have seen this issue, you will learn how to fix the problem by adjusting the detail view models. Let's switch to Visual Studio. Here I've started the Friend Organizer application. Over the Create menu, I can create new friends and new meetings. As we have a tabbed user interface, I can click multiple times Create New Friends, and this will open up multiple tabs. Now when I try to close such a tab, I get our message box, which is OK. I click OK to close it. And now we are here in the Remove Detail View Model method of the main view model. As you can see, we got an invalid operation exception. Sequence contains more than one matching element. In this code block, we grab the detail view model by ID and view model name to remove it so that the tab will close. But the ID for new items is always 0. So now we have multiple items where the ID and the view model name are the same. Let's see how we can fix this. So I stop the application. First I go to the Friend Detail View model of the Friend Organizer application. When I scroll down to the loadAsync method, you can see that we take here a nullable int. If the friend ID has a value, we load the friend from the database and else we create a new friend. Now I change this nullable int parameter to a normal int. Then we can decide here if the friend ID that is passed in is greater than 0, then we will load the friend from the database by using that friend ID, and else we will create a new friend. As the database will always contain friends with IDs that are greater than 0, this logic will work. Then on the next line, I also store the passed in friend ID in the ID property of my friend detail view model. Now as you can see, the loadAsync method is underlined red, because no suitable method found to override in the detail view model base class. So let's scroll up a bit and let's right click on detail view model base and let's go to this class. When I scroll down here, you can see the loadAsync method, and I make the ID parameter also a normal int and not a nullable int. Now I also open up the meeting detail view model, and there we need to do the same in the loadAsync method. So I go to the loadAsync method and I change the parameter type to a normal int. If the received meeting ID is greater than 0, then we just load that meeting from the database and else we create a new meeting. I also store the received meeting ID in the ID property of my meeting detail view model. Now let's try to build the solution. I get some errors that my detail view models don't implement the iDetail view model interface. So I double click on one of these errors, and now I'm here in the friend detail view model and I can see that it doesn't implement the loadAsync method with a nullable int. So I right click on the iFriend detail view model interface and I right click on iDetail view model and I say go to definition. In the iDetail view model interface we have also defined the loadAsync method, and here we change the parameter also to a normal int. Now let's try to build the solution again, and it still failed. Now we have one error in the main view model, and this is in the onOpenDetailView method. Here we call the loadAsync method of the detail view model and we pass in the ID of the OpenDetailView event args. As the ID property of the OpenDetailView event args is a nullable int, this doesn't work. So let's also go to these OpenDetailView event args and let's change the ID property to a normal int. When an instance of these OpenDetailView event args is created without setting the ID property will be 0 by default. So now we can run the application and let's see what happens. I click on Create New Friend and a tab comes up. When I click the menu item again, nothing happens, because now we have already opened up a tab with the ID 0. So when I open up other friends and I click on Create New Friend, the tab that we have already opened comes up here. Now I just add a new friend and I call the friend Anna and I click Save. And then when I create new friend, another tab comes up to create a new friend. So I have only one tab open to create a new friend, and maybe also an additional tab to create a new meeting. But when I click Create New Meeting again, I'm back in this tab that is already open. So let's select another one and let's select Create New Meeting, and then we are back in the tab where we have the new meeting that we haven't saved yet. But now what if you want to have a behavior where you can create multiple new items at the same time? We can also implement this. Let's stop the application. Now I go to the main view model and to the onCreateNewDetailExecute method. This is the execute method for the create new detail command that is used by the menu items. I define a private field of type int and I call it next new item ID, and I set this field to 0. Now here where I create the new OpenDetailView event args, I set the ID property of these OpenDetailView event args and I use the next new item ID field and I use the decrement operator. So every time this onCreateNewDetail execute method is called, the next new item ID field will be decremented by 1. This means on the other side that every new detail view model will have its own unique ID. So let's run the application again. Now I create a new friend and I click again create new friend and you can see I can open up as many tabs as I want. Now I type in some names here, Brian, and on the other tab Elsa, and now I can also close these tabs and you see we don't have a problem anymore because every tab has its own unique ID. Now we are done with the tabbed user interface in the Friend Organizer application. Let's wrap up what you have learned in this module. In this module, you have seen how to switch the Friend Organizer application to a tabbed user interface. You learned how to adjust the main view model, and you also learned how to add a tab control to the UI and how to bind it to the properties of the main view model. This included how to open and close tab items. You also learned how to refresh updated friends in the meeting detail view. You learned that Entity Framework's DB context is caching entities, and you have seen how to reload a single entity from the database with Entity Framework. To do this, you have to grab the DB entity entry instance for the entity that you want to reload. So now we are done with the tabbed user interface in the Friend Organizer application. In the next module, we will introduce another detail view that is a bit different from the friend detail view and from the meeting detail view. It will be a single detail view for a collection of entities. Welcome to the module Creating a Detail View for Collections. My name is Thomas Claudius Huber. In the Friend Organizer application, we have created the friend detail view to edit a single friend. We have also the meeting detail view to edit a single meeting. Now we will introduce a new detail view for programming languages, and this detail view is a bit different. It is not used to edit a single programming language. Instead, it is used to edit a collection of programming languages. Let me show you the module outline. In this module, you learn how to create the programming language detail view. As mentioned, this is a single view that is used to edit all the programming languages in the Friend Organizer application. Throughout this module, you learn how to implement the repository, the view model, and also the view with the data grid. So you see we have some work to do. Let's start to integrate the programming language detail view into the Friend Organizer application. In this demonstration, you learn how to integrate the detail view for programming language entities into the Friend Organizer application. While the detail views for friends and meetings just display a single entity, this detail view will display all the programming languages. So it's a bit different. We just need a single tab for this detail view and not multiple tabs. In this demonstration, we try to set up the skeleton to display a single view in a single tab. While setting up this skeleton, you will learn how to create a detail view model for programming languages, how to create a view, and also how to add a new command to the main view model to open up that view. So you see we have some work. Let's switch to Visual Studio. In the View Model folder of the Friend Organizer UI project, we have defined our view model classes. Now I just right-click that folder to add a new class that I call Programming Language Detail View Model. I make this class public and I inherit from Detail View Model base. I press Ctrl- to generate the constructor in my class, and I press Ctrl- again to implement the abstract members. Let me add some line breaks in the constructor so that you can see it all. I also remove the unnecessary usings here. In the constructor, I set the title property to Programming Languages. I scroll down to the loadAsync method, and here I add a to-do comment, load data here. I set the ID property of our detail view model to the ID that we receive as a parameter. Now I need to return a task. I just use the delay method of the task class and I delay by 0 milliseconds. Later, we will remove this delay method again when we load the data by using our repository. So that's it already in the Programming Language Detail View model. When I scroll down, you can see the methods for the save command and for the delete command. I don't implement these methods yet. To use the Programming Language Detail View model in the Friend Organizer application, we need to register it in the AutoFac container. So I open up the Bootstrapper class that is in the Startup folder. When I scroll down, you can see that we register here the Friend Detail View model and here the Meeting Detail View model. Now I just copy these two lines for the registration of the Meeting Detail View model and I paste them again. I want to register the new Programming Language Detail View model. And I also register this one as an iDetail View model and with the name Programming Language Detail View model. Now we are done with the view model and we can create a view. So I right click on the view folder and I add a new user control. I call that user control Programming Language Detail View. In the SAML code for this user control, I don't implement anything, we will do this later. Now let's open up the main window and let's map our view model to the view that we have created. So in the main window, we have these implicit data templates. I just copy the data template for the Meeting Detail View model and I paste it here. Now I want to have a data template for our new Programming Language Detail View model. And I want to use the Programming Language Detail View for this view model. Now we need to open up this view somehow. So when I scroll down a bit, you can see here the menu of the application with the menu item Create. With the sub-menu items, the user can create new friends and new meetings. Now I add another main menu item to the menu with the header Edit. And this menu item will contain a sub-menu item with the header Programming Languages. I bind the command property of this menu item to a new Open Single Detail View command property that we need to create in the main view model. To keep this generic, I also define a command parameter like we did for the other commands. So I want to pass in the type of the view model. I just copy this and I paste it here, and in this case I want to pass in the Programming Language Detail View model. Now we are done in the main window and we need to add this Open Single Detail View command property to the main view model. So I open up the view model folder and I open up the main view model class. When I scroll down a bit, you can see here the Create New Detail command property, and below I just create another property of type iCommand that I call Open Single Detail View command. I remove the setter as we will initialize this property directly in the constructor. So here in the constructor, I initialize our new Open Single Detail View command property with a new delegate command that takes a type as a parameter. I call the execute method onOpenSingleDetailViewExecute. I press Ctrl to generate this method in the main view model. The method has been created directly below the constructor. I cut it from here and I scroll down to the onCreateNewDetailExecute method and I paste it below that method. I rename the parameter to viewModelType. Inside of the method, I do exactly the same as in the onCreateNewDetailExecute method. I want to raise a new OpenDetailView event by using this onOpenDetailView method. So I copy this code block and I paste it here. But in this case, I never want to use a different ID, as I want to open up always the same tab if it's already open. Remember, we will edit all the programming languages in a single tab. So instead of using here a changing value, I always use the value -1. You can define here whatever value you want. I use -1 because then it's clear that this value is not used to load an entity from the database. And it's also clear that this value is hard-coded so that always the same tab opens up for this view model name. Because when you look at the Programming Language Detail View model, you can see that we store the value of the ID in the ID property of this Detail View model. As we never change the value of this ID property, it will stay at -1. That means if a Programming Languages tab is already open, no new tab will be opened, but the existing will be selected. Now let's start the application and let's see if this works. I open up some friends, and now I go to the Edit menu and I click Programming Languages. Here we see the new Programming Languages tab. I open up a meeting and another friend, and I close a friend, and we can see our Programming Languages tab here. When I go to Edit Programming Languages, no new tab is opened, but the existing is just selected. Exactly what we want. Now we can implement the logic in this tab.